All right, and now we get to the main event of the evening for the UFC Lightweight Championship. You have champ versus champ, as the UFC Featherweight Champion, 25-1, Alexander the Great Volkanovski, moves up to 155 pounds to challenge Islam Makhachev at 23-1 for his UFC Lightweight Championship. A combined record of 48-2 between two of the best mixed martial artists on the planet. This is not only a battle of who will leave Perth, Australia as the UFC lightweight champion, it is also a battle of who is going to leave as potentially the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in mixed martial arts. Oh, I'm getting out of breath just friggin' hyping up that intro, baby. Let's go. Let's go. This is such a great fight, man. I'm so excited to break this down for you. I hope you're just as excited to listen to my breakdown on Volkanovski versus Makhachev, or Makhachev, however you want to say it. But I believe Makhachev is the correct pronunciation, baby. All right. Let's look at the stats real quick before we get into the breakdown. 5'10" for the champion in Islam Makhachev, 5'6" for the featherweight champion in Alexander the Great Volkanovski. 4-inch height advantage for Islam, but at the same time, Volkanovski is used to having a height disadvantage in most of his fights, so I don't necessarily think that's going to play too much of a factor in how Volkanovski approaches it, because he's used to being the shorter guy, so don't pay too much attention to that when you break it down. Reach, a 1-inch reach advantage for Volkanovski, 70.5-inch reach for Makhachev to 71.5-inch reach for Volkanovski. You have a 40.5-inch leg reach for Islam Makhachev to a 36-inch leg reach for Volkanovski. That's going to be very important. I mean, Islam is the taller guy, 4-inch height advantage and a 3.5-inch leg reach advantage, or a 4.5-inch leg reach advantage. So the kicks of Islam Makhachev from a long range, to the body, to the head, I think those can give Volkanovski some issues, but I don't think we're going to see too many kicks from the side of Islam, aside from a left high kick maybe to stop the right hand of Volkanovski, to negate the right hand and shut it down with that high guard. But I think more of the kicking game is going to come from Volk, because he sets it up so well and finds a way to close the distance and kind of put a smoke screen in front of his kicks to land them effectively. And we'll talk about that when we get into the full-on breakdown. When you look at the win percentages, you've got a 17% KO TKO victory rate for Islam Makhachev, a 48% submission rate, and a 35% decision rate. So Islam is sitting at a 65%. 65% finish rate. And then with Volkanovski, you've got a 63% finish rate with a 38% decision rate. Average fight time, Makhachev gets him out of there pretty quick most of the time, 9 minutes and 6 seconds to 16 minutes and 50 seconds for Alexander the Great Volkanovski. Volkanovski's got the ability to TKO you, but a lot of the time he drags you into the deep waters and gets the nod on the scorecards. Knockdowns per 15-minute fight, I don't think this is going to be too much of a factor, especially in this 25-minute bout. 0.38 for the lightweight champion in Islam Makhachev to 0.37 for Alexander Volkanovski. We look at the significant strikes. This will be very interesting. You got 2.37 significant strikes landed per minute for Makhachev to 6.79 significant strikes landed per minute for Volkanovski, the featherweight champion. So you're sitting at a 4.42 strike per minute advantage in significant strikes landed per minute. So he's like tripling up the output that Islam throws in terms of the strikes, not only thrown but landed as well. When it comes to the accuracy, not only is Volkanovski more active by a mile, landing over 4 more significant strikes per minute, but Islam's at a 59% significant strike accuracy rate to a 57% significant strike accuracy rate for the featherweight champion in Volkanovski. So even though Islam is 2% more accurate with the significant strikes, you also have to look at the fact that Volkanovski is landing over 4 more significant strikes per minute. Strikes absorbed per minute, this is going to be more on the side of Islam. He doesn't get hit very much. 0.95 significant strikes absorbed per minute for the lightweight champion to 3.53 significant strikes absorbed per minute for Alexander the Great Volkanovski. So even though he's landing over 4 more strikes per minute is Volkanovski, he's also taking over 2.5 more strikes per minute when it comes to the statistical analysis. Defense, 66% striking defense for Islam Makhachev to 60% striking defense rate for the featherweight champion in Alexander the Great Volkanovski. When you look at the grappling, 3.42 takedowns per 15-minute fight for Islam, almost 4 takedowns per 15-minute fight, to 1.71 takedowns for Volkanovski. So basically, almost 4 takedowns for Islam to almost 2 takedowns per 15-minute fight for Volkanovski. But we knew the wrestling and grappling and top control advantage was more going to come on the side of the lightweight champion in Makhachev to begin with. Takedown accuracy, again, you got to break that down. 65% takedown accuracy. So not only is Islam shooting almost 4 takedowns per 15-minute fight, he's getting at least 6 to 7 out of 10 of those takedowns on every attempt. So if he shoots 10 takedowns, he's getting at least 6, sometimes 7 out of those 10 takedowns. When it comes to Volkanovski, he only has a 36% takedown accuracy rate. So let's say Volkanovski shoots 2 takedowns, he's not always getting 1. You know, he's really not too accurate with his takedowns, but he shoots them to offset the opponent's rhythm, and sometimes he will get the opponent to the ground. When it comes to takedown defense, 88% takedown defense rate for Islam Makhachev to 73% takedown defense rate for Alexander Volkanovski. You know, basically he's defending 7 to 8 out of 10 takedowns. Islam defending almost 9 out of 10 takedowns when it comes to breaking it down statistically. It's not really going to be takedowns on the side of Volkanovski. I could see him using some trips if he's able to catch a kick of Islam and you know, trip out the base leg and get a takedown that way. But I don't necessarily think we're going to see Volkanovski close the range and get into clinch range with Islam Makhachev and, you know, shoot the takedowns. Because even if you shoot and Islam defends it, yeah, you're making him work, but at the same time, you're putting yourself into the position to get put in the over-under, to get put in the double-under clinch, to get, you know, Russian tie sweep, then swept into mount like he did to Arman Sarukian. Anytime you're giving Islam the ability to get into clinch range where he can offset your rhythm and use his grappling in the over-unders, the double-unders, the body lock, the inside trips, the outside trips, you know, the Russian tie sweeps like we've talked about, the Russian tie sweep into mount like he did against Arman, you know, body lock takedowns like he used against Thiago Moises, double leg takedowns, single legs. Anytime you're in that realm where he can set up those entries, set up those transitions, that's not where Volkanovski's going to want to be. So being in the clinch is definitely not the best idea for Volkanovski, but we can stop ranting. Islam also has a 1.27 submission average per 15-minute fight to 0.22 for Alexander the Great Volkanovski, but we knew the grappling was going to be more on the side of Islam Makhachev. The odds for this fight are completely disrespectful. I think Islam's like a minus 350, minus 400 favorite to a plus 300 underdog for Volkanovski. I know we've seen this a lot with Islam where he's such a big favorite in some of his fights, and then, you know, everybody jumps on the dog, but then he dominates his opponent and it doesn't really matter. I feel like this is definitely the Khabib effect. We're going to see a lot of people throwing money on the featherweight champion in Volkanovski, myself included. I'm probably going to put some money on Volk as well. That doesn't tell you my prediction because we haven't got there yet, but I could definitely see myself throwing some money on Alexander the Great. But, you know, it's kind of the thing of Khabib. Like, yeah, Islam's lost before. He was knocked out by Adriano Martins early in his career. Volkanovski has also lost in MMA. The one loss he had was at 170 pounds, so you have to take that into consideration when breaking down the matchup as well. You know, Makhachev, or I'm sorry, what was I going to say? I know the odds are going to make you immediately want to jump on Volkanovski, and I'm not going to, you know, fret you for that, but you have to look at Khabib's career where he was constantly a big favorite in all of his fights, and people would jump on the underdog thinking he was finally going to lose. It's kind of the same thing with Islam. It's a lot of the same thing with the Dagestanis, you know, especially out of Khabib's camp. You know, the odds are going to make you think to go one way, but intelligence may tell you to go another way if you really break down the fight from an analytical standpoint and do some tape study. Listen, we know what Islam's going to look to do. He's going to look to close the distance on Volk, get into the clinch, use the inside and outside trips, use the single legs, use the double legs. I think the trips are going to be what Islam looks for, just because the fact that Volkanovski is a shorter fighter, it helps him in terms of takedown offense if he was the one who was going to be shooting those takedowns because you're lower to the ground, but it also helps you in terms of defending takedown attempts because you have a lower center of gravity, and it's going to make it easier for you to lower your level and distribute your base evenly to stop potential inside trips, outside trips, double leg takedowns. But the clinch is not the place that Volkanovski wants to be. Volkanovski is a master of using fakes and feints, rhythm changes, kind of pushing you forward and then pulling you back. He's a push and pull style of fighter. Push forward, back up, push forward, pull you in. Even against Max Holloway, especially in the trilogy bout, it was 1-2, step back, uppercut, left hook, 1-2, step back, cross, left hook. So he would 1-2 and then anticipate the counter and counter the counter. Volkanovski is an offensive fighter who counters your counter, anticipating that you're going to have a counter waiting for him. And that's something that Islam has to be weary about. But I feel like Islam is going to try to counter the pressure of Volkanovski, or counter the anti-pressure, I guess, because he's kind of like that push and pull. So the pressure isn't always looking like it's in Volkanovski's control, but he's kind of controlling the ability to pull you in and lure you into the game that he wants to play. I feel like Islam pressuring Volkanovski, I think Islam is definitely going to be the pressure fighter. He's going to be the one pushing Volkanovski back, trying to get him up against the cage. But Volk is so good at using the lateral movement. He's so good at angle changing. 1-2, pull back, 2-3, boom, move off. And we said the same thing about Charles Oliveira, where Oliveira is not only good at striking going forward, he's also good at landing counter shots backing up. I think Volkanovski is a much better counter striker off the back foot than Charles Oliveira is, but we saw that even with Islam, it doesn't really matter because he was able to outstrike Oliveira in most aspects as well. Oliveira had some okay success, but for the most part, it was a one-way ticket to ass-kicking County for the new lightweight champion in Islam Makhachev, in a fight where I picked Oliveira to win, and I thought it was going to be competitive. And even though some of the grappling exchanges were competitive and Oliveira was able to reverse and get back up to his feet, it was basically domination in a one-way show for Islam Makhachev. And this fight is actually very difficult to break down because Volkanovski has good takedown defense. We talked about it statistically, but he's never fought a wrestler the likes of an Islam Makhachev. But he has fought a grappler with the jiu-jitsu the likes of Islam Makhachev. But the difference between Brian Ortega, who we're talking about, in Islam, is the fact that Ortega isn't really a grappler based on top pressure and shutting down your potential defense. He'll use your defensive inconsistencies to open up the submission attempts and the possibilities. He's not much of a takedown offense. He's more of a, have them shoot the takedown or have me hurt them, then they give me their neck, or have them try to work up off of a takedown attempt or a grappling exchange where I end up on top and then I can grab their neck. Just like in the fight where Volkanovski got a kick caught and a right hand landed, and then Volkanovski fell to his back, and immediately Brian Ortega was on the top position in the mount, locking up the front choke, trying to get the guillotine, and almost got it. And then another time, Volkanovski jumped into the guard again of Brian Ortega and tried to play around a little bit and almost got caught in a triangle choke. I mean, Ortega definitely sets up his submissions faster, but Islam is different than Khabib in the fact that he can stay on the feet. He's comfortable playing on the feet, but he's also a little bit more submission hungry in terms of looking to set up the submissions, when I feel like Khabib was more of looking to, Khabib was more looking to get positional dominance and then set up the submission attempts off of your defensive irresponsibility. With Islam, I feel like he hunts for submissions more than Khabib did, which makes him more of a threat, and makes Volkanovski need to really mind his P's and Q's if the fight does go to the ground. And to be honest, if the fight goes to the ground, I mean, Volkanovski's in a world of trouble. I know he survived against Ortega. I don't necessarily think he can survive for that long against Makhachev. However, I think the strength of Volkanovski is something that people are heavily underestimating. I mean, the guy was a former rugby player, a former professional rugby player, playing at upwards of over 200 pounds. He fought at 170. That's the only loss he had in his MMA career, at least in the pro side. And Volkanovski's now down at 145. To formerly weigh, over 200 pounds and play rugby, and then to get down to such good shape to the fact where you can lose all that fat, turn it into muscle, lean yourself out, and be able to compete at 145 when he probably walks around at like 170, 172, somewhere around there. If I had to guess, that would probably be his walk-around weight, between 165 and 175. I think that strength in such a compact frame is going to make it a lot harder for Islam to tie up with Volkanovski than people are anticipating. And I think his takedown defense is going to be a lot better because of the fact that he's a shorter fighter. I think it's going to be harder for Islam to set up those takedowns because the double legs and single legs aren't going to be as easy because Volkanovski's lower to the ground and his base is more down to the ground than a taller opponent like a Dan Hooker, so to speak, who's a training partner of Alexander Volkanovski, or like an Oliveira, who's a tall, long, rangy guy. Volkanovski's short, he's compact, and he's powerful, which means that the doubles and singles aren't going to work the best. And even in the clinch, the fact that Volkanovski's lower is going to make it easier for him to defend the takedowns than if it was a taller opponent where he could use that height to kind of manipulate their balance and take them down. It's going to be harder to take down a shorter opponent, but I do think Islam will get some takedowns. Like I said, it's the push and pull from Volkanovski. It's the 1-2, pull back, 2-3. It's the jab, left hook, right hand, left hook, right low kick. It's the left hook into the left outside low kick. It's the 1-2, left hook into that inside low kick because he's going to be fighting a southpaw. So 1-2, left hook, drag it across to the inside, attack the lead right leg of Islam. And he's going to be looking to get that outside foot. I expect the jab-heavy approach from Volkanovski, a lot of fakes and feints to offset the rhythm of Islam, try to pull out the shots, and then back up, maintain the distance, and then as Islam, goes back to reset after that failed takedown attempt, that's when the strikes are going to come. So he's going to fake and feint, jab, left hook, feint. Islam's going to feint, probably shoot, back up, 1-2, 1-3-2, 2-3, and then move, 1-2-3-2. The speed of Volkanovski with the striking on the feet is going to give Islam a lot of trouble, but I also think people underestimate Islam's striking ability. I mean, he did drop Charles Oliveira with the right hook into the straight left, or the straight left into the right hook. He's very good with the 3-2, right hook, straight left. Very good with the 1-2 from southpaw. The 2-3, it's hook, cross, hook, jab, cross. Those are the best weapons from Islam, and he's very good with the left high kick. He landed that against Charles Oliveira as well. So look out for the left body kick and the left high kick from Islam to try to shut down the power right hand of Volkanovski. I think we're going to get a chess match, and this fight is going to be a lot more competitive than people actually actively anticipate when breaking it down. I think the fakes and feints are going to draw out takedown attempts from the range that Islam does not want to be at. I think the speed of Volkanovski is going to give a lot of trouble to Islam, especially when he tries to set up those takedowns. I think the fact that Volkanovski is so in tune and focused for every one of his fights, mixes up the takedowns, mixes up the stance changes, 1-2, left hook, low kick behind it, 1-2, kick behind it. He sets up weird angles and throws his kicks at the same time that he throws his punches. Volkanovski does not throw naked kicks. Every kick that he throws is set up behind a hook into the same side kick, across into the same side kick, across into the lead side kick. You never really see Volkanovski throw naked kicks where it's not set up, and everything that Volkanovski throws is set up with a fake. It's set up with a feint. It's set up with something in front of it to time you and get you to run into something that you're not anticipating. Volkanovski is a master of the push and pull, a master of the fake and feint game, and everything is set up. And on top of that, he has the strength carried down to the 155-pound division. Even though he's moving up, I think the strength isn't going to be much of a problem for Volkanovski. He's used to being the shorter fighter. The last thing he wants to do is get taken down by Islam and end up on the bottom. We saw him have trouble against Ortega. If you have trouble against Ortega, you're going to have trouble against Islam. But I think the fakes and feints, the strength of Volkanovski, the ability to use everything and set up everything that he throws and be very meticulous, I think that Volkanovski is one of the most intelligent fighters in mixed martial arts. And I think the fact that he sets up everything and is so focused on his game plan throughout the entirety of the fight and never breaks focus. Islam doesn't break focus either, but I think it's due to the fact that he's had so much success and not too much resistance that if Islam starts to get resisted and the takedown attempts aren't there, the range is off for Islam and he's getting caught with counters against Volkanovski, who's going to be the more heavy power puncher and the faster overall striker. He's going to have the speed and power advantage. Islam is going to have the grappling dominance dominance, the grappling strength, and the positional advantage against a guy like Volkanovski with the height advantage. But the power, the speed, the ability to use the fakes and feints, the fact that Volkanovski doesn't break focus, I think that's all things you have to look into. You have to look into the mental side, man. Both of these guys do not lose. And although Islam, has been so dominant, at this point in his career, Volkanovski has also beaten much higher level competition. Chad Mendes, Jose Aldo, Brian Ortega, Max Holloway 3 times, the Korean zombie Chan Sung Jung. I mean, you name it, Volkanovski has beat the best of the best at 145 pounds. Islam has beat some very, very solid competition as well, and you can't discredit him. But he beat Charles Oliveira, dominated him. You have to take that's his best win. But before that, Bobby Green, Thiago Moises, etc., etc. And it's kind of the same narrative that we've had with, Khabib Nurmagomedov throughout his career. Until he got to those upper echelon of opponents, we always said, oh, well, he only fought Gleason Tebow. He only fought, who am I forgetting? Not TJ Grant. I can't think. Pat Healy, sorry. He beat Pat Healy. Okay. He beat Michael Johnson. Okay, Johnson's not that great. Oh, he beat Edson Barbosa. Barbosa's a good fighter, but he always falls under the pressure. We said it so many times until we just couldn't say it anymore. And although Islam's not undefeated, he still has one loss early in his career that is by KO, so we have to take that into consideration as well. But Islam hasn't fought that competition level yet, just like Khabib, to where you can't discredit it. But if we're looking at it statistically and just as an analytical standpoint, Volkanovski has fought the better competition. And I guess what you're looking for right now is who do I think is going to win? Who is my pick? Do I think Islam will improve to 24-1 and retain his lightweight title and become the pound for pound best in the sport? Or do I think Volkanovski spoils the party? Do I think Alexander the Great becomes the greatest pound for pound mixed martial artist in modern day MMA? Cue the Wheel of Fortune music. My pick for this fight is going to be Anu. I'm going with Alexander Volkanovski. I've never picked against Volk since I've done this podcast, and I haven't been wrong yet. And that's not necessarily the entire reason, so you can take it with a grain of salt when it comes to me making a prediction for this fight. But to be honest, man, I think Volkanovski is so mentally tough. I think he's so good with the fakes and feints. I think his mental game, along with his technical game, he's such a smart fighter. Islam is very smart as well, but I feel like sometimes he goes into areas of fights that he doesn't want to be in or need to be in just because he wants to prove a point. Even there was points against Charles Oliveira where he went into aspects of the fight where he didn't have to and entertain the striking, even though he outstruck Charles for the majority of the fight and showed that his striking isn't as bad. He really has to stick to the game plan against Volkanovski, and Volkanovski is a master of sticking to a game plan. Very methodical, very, win strategy based. The number one key for Volkanovski is to win the fight. He's not necessarily always worried about putting on entertaining fights. His number one priority is to win. Islam is the same way, which makes this fight so interesting on every level. And the UFC should be ashamed of themselves for how little they've promoted this fight in the lead up, because this is potentially the fight of the year and one of the best fights that the MMA gods could ever have graced us with. This is one of the best fights in mixed martial arts history. And the fact that not too many people are talking about it right now really makes me mad. But besides the point, the fakes and feints, the mental side of this fight, the ability that Volkanovski has to never stray away from a game plan, even under pressure and even in danger. I think he gets it done, man. I think he uses those fakes and feints. I think he outstrikes Islam on the feet. I know Islam's striking looks better, but Volkanovski is far and ahead the better, more technical, and more powerful striker on the feet, and it's not even close. And I'm just going to go with Volk, man. I think he gets it done. You've heard my analysis. You've heard my breakdown. I'm going with Alexander the Great Volkanovski to defeat the lightweight champion in Islam Makhachev, moving him to 23-2 and improving Volkanovski's record to 26-1 and becoming the new UFC lightweight champion. All right, that's it for this fight. When it comes to the betting side, I like the over 2.5 rounds. I really do. I think it's like minus 160, minus 165. I like that. I like Volkanovski on the money line, but I wouldn't parlay it. If you're looking to parlay this fight, you would do the over 2.5 rounds, in my opinion. That's what I think the best play is for this fight overall. But you can get this podcast anywhere your podcasts are distributed. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Breaker, Stitcher, and many, many more. This podcast will be uploaded in full with edits and broken down into individual segments on my YouTube channel, which is almost at 3,000 subscribers now. Thank you again to anybody who partook in that, because I'm trying to take over the MMA and pro wrestling game in terms of the media side. So thank you all. You can support the podcast by donating to the PayPal address located in the description. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on my YouTube channel where this will be uploaded, and have a blessed day. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out.